Imagine looking directly at the sun.
Oh, well, I mean, conceptually. Right.
Right. Conceptually. Not literally. Please don't burn your retinas. But think about just the sheer mass of it.
Yeah, the scale is just, it's hard to wrap your head around.
Exactly. It has this inescapable gravitational pull, and it dictates the orbit, the climate, the literal existence of everything around it.
Right.
Now, map that scale onto a company, because today we aren't talking about a billion-dollar unicorn anymore.
No, in this context, a unicorn is like just a moderately successful asteroid.
A moderately successful asteroid, exactly. We are talking about a trillion-dollar empire, an economic sun that is so massive it fundamentally rewires how human civilization operates.
It's an intimidating premise, isn't it? Because, when we usually think about a corporation reaching that level of planetary dominance, the immediate association is usually, well, dystopia.
Oh, 100%. Cyberpunk dystopia.
Right. We think of monopolistic power, wealth concentration, and just a handful of executives hoarding resources while everyone else fights over the scraps.
Which brings us to the massive, seemingly impossible contradiction we are unpacking today. Can an entity with that much power, that much gravitational pull, actually be the exact mechanism we use to eradicate global poverty?
And that's the thing. The author of the text we're analyzing today argues that those two concepts, right, trillion-dollar corporate scale and the systematic eradication of poverty, they are not just compatible.
They're what, codependent?
Exactly. The core thesis is that they are entirely codependent. If capitalism is going to survive the next century without, tearing itself apart, the architecture of these mega corporations has to fundamentally change.
And that is what we are diving into. So welcome to the deep dive. Today, you and I are exploring a fascinating text that is part tactical strategy playbook, part architectural blueprint.
It's called Unicorn to Solara with Purpose: Marketing, Mergers, and Responsible Capitalism.
Yeah, and the author has laid out this literal step-by-step roadmap for early-stage companies to evolve from a billion-dollar unicorn to a trillion-dollar Solara.
And the wild part, the part that really caught my attention, is they claim you can only reach that Solara status if you engineer the end of extreme poverty along the way.
It's a huge claim. But before we start talking about, building economic suns and rewriting human civilization, we have to establish the ground rules.
Right. We have to do a baseline reality check because the author is incredibly strict about this.
Yeah, this isn't for everyone.
No, not at all. This deep dive and the strategy in this book is absolutely not for someone sitting in a coffee shop with an idea scribbled on a napkin.
Right. You don't get to worry about global poverty if you can't even pay your server hosting bills.
Exactly. You have to survive Tuesday before you can govern the future. The text insists on 3 absolute non-negotiables before scale is even allowed to enter the conversation.
Okay, let's hear them.
Number 1, you must have a real product that works. Not a prototype, not a waitlist. A real functioning product.
Makes sense. What's number 2?
Number 2 is you must have proven product market fit. And number 3, you must have early, repeatable revenue.
Okay, let's hover on product market fit for a second, because that is such a buzzword. Everyone says they have it.
Oh, constantly.
What does the author actually mean by it in this context? Because, a lot of founders think they have product market fit when their mom and 3 friends download their app.
Right. Well, the author defines it as the market actively pulling the product out of your hands.
Pulling it out of your hands.
Yeah. It means if you turned off your servers tomorrow, a specific group of people would be genuinely angry. Their day would be measurably worse.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's not about positive feedback on a survey. It's about dependency. Until you have that dependency and the early revenue to prove it, none of the advanced mechanics we are about to discuss will work.
Because you're just accelerating a flawed model.
Precisely. You're just speeding toward a brick wall.
Okay, let's unpack this. So let's say you, listening right now, have actually hit those 3 non-negotiables. You have a working product, people are paying for it, and they'd be furious if you took it away.
Which is a huge achievement on its own.
Huge. But the author's argument is that the rest of the journey to $1 billion, and then $1 trillion, is no longer about catching lightning in a bottle. It is about repeatable, almost boring structural mechanics.
Yes. And the very first mechanic requires a complete destruction of how most founders understand growth.
A complete destruction.
Basically. Because to reach that $1 trillion mark, you have to break free from the gravity of being a small, obscure startup. The text argues the key to this is completely redefining what marketing actually is.
And this is where I think most people get it wrong, because I think most of us assume marketing is just Well, yelling.
Yelling.
Exactly. You build a thing and then you try to get people to look at the thing.
That is the megaphone approach.
Yeah.
And the author argues it is a fatal flaw. I mean, think about the typical startup timeline, right?
Okay.
A team of engineers locks themselves in a room for, say, 8 months. They build a product in a total vacuum. Then they hand it over to a marketing team and say, we built this. Now go shout about it.
Right. Buy Facebook ads, sponsor podcasts, generate hype, blast emails.
Yeah. The marketing team is basically the hype man for the engineers.
But the problem with a megaphone is it only works if the people you are shouting at actually care about what you're saying.
And usually they don't.
Right. So what happens?
You experience linear, exhausting growth. You are paying for every single eyeball. It's an uphill battle. And you're just burning cash to convince people they have a problem that your product supposedly solves.
I'm going to push back here for a second, just on behalf of the listener who might be an engineer or a product designer.
Sure, go ahead.
Isn't the prevailing wisdom that if you build a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to your door? Like, if I engineer the most elegant, flawless piece of software, people will find it because quality wins.
I mean, that is the most persistent and dangerous myth in Silicon Valley.
Is it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
History is literally littered with technically superior products that were just completely crushed by inferior products.
Just because the inferior ones had better marketing.
Better distribution, better positioning. Yeah.
So a great product without marketing is like, well, I was thinking about this analogy. It's like a beautifully engineered lighthouse, right? Yeah, it's built with perfect structural integrity, can withstand a Category 5 hurricane. It has the best, most expensive lenses. But if there's no light shining out of it...
The ships don't care how well it was built.
Exactly. They are still going to crash right into the rocks.
That is a phenomenal analogy, and it leads perfectly into the author's paradigm shift. If traditional marketing is a megaphone, the author argues that true marketing must be the company's nervous system.
Its nervous system?
It is a radar.
A radar. Okay, so it's not about broadcasting, it's about receiving.
Yes. Its primary function is to listen. It is a continuous loop of systematic signal collection. The goal is to decode the market's subconscious.
Wait, the market's subconscious?
Yeah, you were trying to find out what people actually want, the pain points they're experiencing, which they often just lack the vocabulary to articulate.
But how do you listen to something someone can't even articulate? That sounds like, I don't know, mind reading.
It's not magic, it's forensics.
Forensics.
Right. You don't just send out a survey asking, hey, do you like our app? Because people lie, or they honestly don't know what they want.
So what do you look at?
You look at behavioral data. You look at where they click and then abandon the page. You study churn, meaning you obsessively interview the people who cancel their subscriptions. You analyze their search queries. But most importantly, you look for workarounds.
Workarounds. Give me an example of a workaround.
Okay, let's say you built a project management software. You notice a huge chunk of your users are exporting their task lists into Excel spreadsheets to do calculations.
Ah, and then importing them back in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The megaphone approach would be running ads saying, our task lists are the best. The radar approach notices that weird, clunky workaround and says, wait a minute, they don't actually want task lists.
They want integrated financial forecasting.
Bingo. And they're using your tool awkwardly to try and get it.
I see. So the radar gives you the actual reality of the market, not your fantasy of what the market should be.
Precisely.
And to operationalize this, the text introduces this 6-stage concept. They call it the escape velocity flywheel. Let's walk through how this actually spins up. What's stage 1?
Stage 1 is exactly what we just discussed, listening. Rigorous, unsentimental data collection.
Yeah.
You are literally hunting for friction.
Which flows right into stage 2, which is insight. This is where you turn the chaotic noise of all those server logs and churn interviews into a strategic revelation.
Right.
But how is an insight different from just a statistic?
Well, a statistic is just numbers. A statistic is 20% of our users cancel after month 3.
Okay.
An insight is a profound realization about human behavior. An insight is realizing, oh, our customers don't actually want a faster analytics dashboard. They want to make fewer decisions.
Oh, wow. That's a huge difference.
It fundamentally shifts your entire reality.
And that shift is what triggers stage 3, roadmap adjustment. Which, sounds so simple on paper, but I imagine this is where founders just lose their minds.
Oh, it is agonizing.
Yeah.
Because you have to bend the product to reality.
Yeah.
If your insight reveals that nobody actually cares about the beautiful, complex feature your lead engineer just spent 8 months building, You have to cut it.
You just kill
You
it.
kill it. You have to align your engineering priorities with the market's strongest demand signals, even if it deeply hurts your ego.
You really have to murder your darlings.
You do. Which leads us to stage 4. Product refinement. You take that adjusted roadmap and you sharpen the tool. You cut away the fat until the product transitions from being merely interesting to being essential.
Essential. What's the metric for that? How do you know when you've hit essential?
Essential means there is actual psychological or operational pain when the user tries to turn your product off.
Like they literally can't do their job without it.
Right. It has become so deeply integrated into their daily habits or their business workflows that removing it would cause absolute chaos.
Which perfectly sets up stage 5, distribution leverage. Or, as the author puts it, building the bucket before you pour the water.
Exactly. When your product is essential, your marketing dollars actually start to compound. You aren't pushing a boulder uphill anymore.
Right. Customers refer other customers because they look smart for recommending it.
Yes. You build a system where growth feeds itself. You have achieved escape velocity.
And once you break out of that initial gravity, you hit the final stage of the flywheel. Stage 6, adjacent expansion, moving into connected markets.
This is where the game changes entirely. Let's go back to our example. Your radar shows you that the people who love your project management software are also deeply frustrated with their payroll software.
Oh, I see.
That's an adjacent lane. It makes logical, strategic sense to expand there.
And here is where the narrative really pivots. When you look into that adjacent lane, it is almost never empty.
No, it never is.
So you, the growing startup, spot the payroll lane, but there's already a massive established company dominating it. What does the traditional Silicon Valley playbook tell a founder to do in that scenario?
The traditional playbook tells you to declare war.
War.
It encourages this deeply toxic warlord mythology. You raise a massive war chest of venture capital, you build a competing product from scratch, you burn millions on aggressive marketing to poach their customers.
And you try to disrupt the incumbent into oblivion.
Right.
I mean, it makes for great movies.
Right.
And great tech blogs.
It really does. But the author argues that trench warfare is destructive, exhaustingly expensive, and honestly strategically foolish.
Because you're just burning money.
You are destroying capital just to fight over the exact same pie. So instead of the zero-sum warfare, the text offers a completely different model based on biology. They call it reverse cell division.
I really love this metaphor. So normally a cell divides, one becomes two. Reverse cell division means taking two distinct entities and fusing them together into one stronger organism.
Yes, the author terms this cooperation capitalism. It is the art of respectful merging rather than hostile acquisition or predatory competition.
How does that actually work?
Well, you find that incumbent in the adjacent market, and instead of trying to kill them, you recognize that they have something you don't.
Like what?
Maybe they have a massive distribution network. Or deep regulatory relationships. And you have the modern, agile technology. You combine your strengths, you eliminate your redundant weaknesses, and you create an entirely new, highly evolved entity.
Okay, mathematically that makes total sense. You save years of time and tens of millions of dollars. But practically, you are asking a visionary type A tech founder to just hold hands with a legacy competitor.
Yeah.
The ego involved in that has to be a massive roadblock.
It is the single biggest point of failure. The author actually calls it the ego versus mission war. Yeah. To execute reverse cell division, founders often have to swallow the hardest psychological pill imaginable.
Which is?
The junior partner principle.
The junior partner principle. Walk me through what that actually looks like in a boardroom, like the actual conversation.
It looks like trading your short-term ego for long-term dominance.
Okay.
It means looking at the incumbent and saying, look, you have 10,000 enterprise clients. We have the technology that those clients desperately need, but we only have 100 clients.
Right, so there's an imbalance.
So we will merge our company into yours. We will take a minority stake, say 30% ownership. We might even give up our brand name.
Wow.
But our technology becomes the core engine of the new combined entity.
So you are intentionally choosing to be second in command. You are giving up the glory of being the standalone unicorn CEO just because the merger gets your product to 1 billion people instantly.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is how the text outlines the architecture of trust required to pull this off. Because you can't execute a merger like that just by signing a legal document.
Right, you can't just force two cultures together.
No. You have to build what the author calls a trust stack, and it's broken down into 5 distinct layers. If any one of these layers is missing, The biological organism basically rejects the new tissue and the merger fails.
Okay, let's build the trust stack. What is layer one?
Layer 1 is strategic trust. Both sides have to look at the market and independently agree that fusing together creates an undeniable monopoly of value. The math has to make sense to absolutely everyone.
That honestly seems like the easy part. The numbers are the numbers. What's layer two?
Layer 2 is cultural trust. And this is where things usually break down.
Oh, I bet.
Think about it. Does a nimble 50-person startup really trust the decision-making speed of a 5,000-person legacy company?
Probably not.
Right. If one company values moving fast and breaking things, and the other values consensus and risk mitigation, the organism will tear itself apart. You have to align on how decisions are actually made.
Makes sense. Okay. Layer three is ethical trust.
This simply means no hidden agendas. The junior partner has to genuinely believe the senior partner isn't just going to, steal their code and fire them.
Yeah, there has to be a shared belief that the deal is inherently fair.
Precisely.
Layer four, operational trust.
Operational trust is about competence. You have to respect each other's abilities. The startup engineers need to believe the incumbent sales team can actually sell the new product.
And the legacy executives need to believe the startup's code won't crash their main servers.
Exactly.
And the final layer, layer five, which sounds a bit soft for a dense business book, is emotional trust.
It might sound soft, but it literally dictates the survival of the company. Founders must feel seen and respected by the acquiring board, and even more importantly, the rank-and-file employees must feel safe.
Which ties directly into a few of the author's integration principles for after the merger actually happens. Like, the text explicitly says you have to integrate people before you integrate systems.
Because if the humans on both sides trust each other, they will sit in a room and figure out the messy software integrations.
But if they don't have emotional trust...
If they feel threatened,
Yeah.
every minor software integration becomes a proxy war for turf and survival.
Oh, that sounds like a nightmare. The author also stresses having one unified product roadmap immediately, right?
Yes, you cannot have the legacy team and the startup team building competing features. It has to be one organism.
Okay, so we have laid out some heavy theoretical frameworks here. We have the radar marketing to find the truth, the flywheel to build momentum, and the humility of reverse cell division to scale without destroying capital.
Right.
But theory is cheap. I want to see how this actually works. Let's move into the real world.
Let's do it.
The author provides 7 specific industry case studies, and we're going to start with 2 from the software and AI world. Let's look at a company called ListenFlow.
ListenFlow is a textbook example of how to evolve a B2B SaaS company.
Let's define that really quickly for anyone outside the tech bubble. B2B SaaS means business-to-business software as a service. You are selling software subscriptions to other companies, not to regular consumers.
Exactly. So ListenFlow started by building a really beautiful revenue analytics dashboard for sales teams. And they hit the non-negotiables. They had a working product market fit, and early revenue.
Okay.
But then growth totally stalled.
Why? If the product was good and they had fit, why did they hit a wall?
They fell victim to what the author calls the curse of general intelligence.
The curse of general intelligence.
Yeah. They were doing a lot of things adequately, showing sales charts, tracking quotas, but they didn't own a specific category in the buyer's mind. They were just, another tab open on a sales manager's browser.
So instead of shouting louder with a megaphone and buying more ads, they turned on their radar. What did they listen to?
They stopped selling and started analyzing the market noise. And they found an incredible insight hidden in a blog post they'd written.
A blog post?
Yeah. They published a highly technical post about operations, and it went absolutely viral within the sales operations community. The comments and the engagement on that post proved a fundamental truth. Their customers were drowning in data.
Oh, they didn't want more analytics dashboards.
No.
Right? Because nobody wakes up and says, I really wish I had another complex graph to look at today. What do they actually want?
They wanted fewer handoffs.
Handoffs.
Think about a typical company. Marketing gets a lead, they hand it to sales. Sales closes it, they hand it to customer success. Customer success hands it to billing.
That's a lot of friction.
And every one of those handoffs is a leaky pipe where data gets lost and revenue drops. The customers didn't want a dashboard to measure the leaks. They wanted workflow automation to fix the leaks.
There is the adjacent market, workflow automation. So ListenFlow spots the lane. But of course, there is a giant incumbent sitting right there, a company called SyncStack.
Right. SyncStack was a massive legacy automation firm. They had the distribution. They had integrations with literally every major software platform on Earth. but their analytics were terrible. ListenFlow, on the other hand, had world-class analytics, but no way to actually move the data around.
So if ListenFlow played the warlord, they would have spent 2 years and $50 million trying to build the automation pipes from scratch just to compete with SyncStack.
And they probably would have died trying.
Yeah.
Instead, they executed a respectful merger. They approached SyncStack with curiosity. They realized that ListenFlow was the brain, the intelligence deciding what should happen, and SyncStack was the hands, the infrastructure that actually did the work.
And here is the junior partner principle in action. ListenFlow accepts 38% ownership of the new combined entity.
Right.
They completely give up majority control.
They do. But look at the result. By fusing the brain and the hands, they created an entirely new category, Revenue Automation Intelligence, or RAI.
Wow.
They stopped fighting for a tiny slice of the dashboard market and instead invented a self-correcting revenue nervous system. Because they leveraged SyncStack's massive distribution, they hit unicorn status almost overnight.
They traded short-term ego for orbital velocity.
Exactly.
That is brilliant for business software. But what about consumer tech? Because, regular people are much more fickle than businesses. Let's look at the second case study. Echo AI.
Echo AI is a fascinating study in consumer behavior. They built an incredibly advanced voice assistant. Think of a hyper-intelligent Siri or Alexa.
Okay.
And initially, it looked like a massive success, millions of downloads in the first month. People were just delighted by it.
But there was a catch, right? The author calls it the app trap.
The app trap is when you have high delight, but zero dependency.
Zero dependency.
Yeah. People would download Echo AI, ask it to tell a joke, ask it to write a poem in the style of Shakespeare, show it to their friends at a bar, and then never open it again.
Yeah, the retention curve just fell off a cliff.
Completely.
Because novelty doesn't pay the bills. If I don't need you to survive my Tuesday, I'm going to delete you the second my phone runs out of storage space.
Precisely. So Echo AI turns on the radar. They conduct what the text calls retention autopsies. That sounds grim.
It means they relentlessly interview the users who abandon the app. And the insight they uncover is completely counterintuitive.
What was?
They discovered that people weren't leaving because the AI wasn't entertaining enough. They were leaving because their lives were fundamentally overwhelmed by cognitive load.
Cognitive load.
Modern knowledge workers are drowning in context switching, jumping from Slack to email to Zoom to documents. Their brains are full.
Yeah.
They simply didn't have the mental energy to learn how to interact with a new, open-ended AI assistant.
Cognitive load is such a great term. It's that feeling at 3 p.m. where your brain just utterly refuses to process one more piece of information.
We all know that feeling.
So Echo AI realizes people don't want a toy. They want a lifeboat.
Exactly. They pivot hard. They move away from ask me anything and focus entirely on run my day.
Yeah.
They target enterprise meeting summaries, actionable task extraction, and schedule optimization. But here's the problem. To fix someone's schedule, you need access to their schedule. You need an adjacent market. And the ultimate battlefield for cognitive load is the digital calendar.
But you cannot just build a new calendar app and ask people to switch.
No way.
The switching costs are astronomically high. Your calendar is tied to your email, your company's domain, your colleagues' availability. If you try to force people to move to a new calendar just for some AI features, you will lose.
So Echo AI employs reverse cell division. They find Daybridge Calendar, an established, widely used platform that completely lacks artificial intelligence, and they merge into it.
Echo AI effectively becomes the intelligence layer inside an existing habit.
I thought of a slightly weird analogy for this when I was reading the text.
Oh, let's hear it.
It's almost like a parasite, but in a totally mutually beneficial, symbiotic way.
Okay, I see where you're going.
You don't try to teach the host organism a new trick. You just attach your brilliant AI brain to the habit the host already does 10 times a day, which is checking their calendar.
That is exactly the mechanism.
Yeah.
By fusing with Daybridge, Echo AI didn't just become an optional feature, it became the operating system for work coordination.
Wow.
It was reading your emails, prepping your meeting notes, and scheduling your follow-ups automatically within the calendar you were already staring at.
So switching away meant losing everything.
Right. Suddenly, switching away from Daybridge meant losing the entire external memory of your organization.
Why?
That created the massive lock-in that drove their valuation past $1 billion.
Okay, so we've seen how this works in digital environments. Software and AI are relatively frictionless. You can push an update, change a code base, and merge APIs.
True.
But what happens when we take these exact same mechanics, the radar listening, the reverse cell division, the junior partner humility, and try to apply them to the physical world.
That is where the difficulty scales exponentially.
Right? Because we are moving into Section 4, rewiring broken industries. Deeply entrenched, heavily regulated, slow-moving legacy systems like healthcare and education.
A whole different ballgame.
Let's look at the third case study, VitalScan.
VitalScan started with a genuinely miraculous piece of technology. They built an AI diagnostic tool for radiology.
Okay.
It could analyze an MRI or a CT scan and spot microscopic tumors or anomalies months earlier and with significantly higher accuracy than human doctors.
See, from the outside, that sounds like an instant Solara company. If you have a machine that demonstrably saves lives, you would think every hospital on Earth would be banging down your door to buy it.
But they weren't. VitalScan's adoption was totally stalled. They were burning cash and getting absolutely nowhere.
Why? How does a life-saving machine fail to sell?
Because VitalScan was using the megaphone. They were shouting, "Look at our incredible AI, look at the accuracy metric."
And no one cared.
When they finally turned on the radar and looked at the realities of healthcare economics, they uncovered a dark systemic truth.
What was the radar insight?
The radar revealed that hospital systems are not structured to reward clinical innovation. They are vast, bureaucratic risk calculators designed almost entirely to avoid disaster and liability.
Oh, wow.
From the perspective of a hospital administrator, better AI is terrifying
Wait, why is better diagnostics terrifying? That sounds backwards.
because it introduces a new variable into a calcified system. If the AI flags something that the human doctor misses, who is liable?
Oh, I see.
Does it increase malpractice insurance? Does it require the radiologist to spend hours learning a new software interface? The hospitals didn't want cutting-edge AI. They wanted workflow certainty and liability reduction.
So selling them a standalone futuristic diagnostic tool was fundamentally the wrong approach. They were trying to sell a spaceship to a bureaucracy that just wanted a safer horse.
Precisely. VitalScan realized they needed to be invisible. They needed to be inside the clinical operations software that the hospitals already trusted and used every single day.
So they find the adjacent lane, clinical operations platforms, and they execute the merger.
Aside MedAccess, MedAccess is a massive medtech distribution giant whose software was already installed in thousands of hospitals. VitalScan approaches them, swallows their pride, and accepts the junior role.
And the crucial integration principle here was exactly what you said, invisibility.
Right.
The VitalScan AI didn't get its own shiny dashboard. It was silently embedded into the MedAccess workflow.
Yes.
But how did it function if it was invisible?
Well, when a radiologist opened the MedAccess software to review their morning scans, the AI had already silently prioritized the queue. The scans with the highest probability of anomalies were pushed to the top. The doctor didn't know an AI was guiding them. They just thought they were having a highly efficient, accurate day.
That is brilliant. It completely bypasses the friction of adopting new tech, and that gets them to unicorn status because hospitals are perfectly happy to pay for invisible risk reduction.
Exactly.
But the text highlights that VitalScan didn't stop there. This is where they make what the author calls the Solara leap, the jump from $1 billion to aiming for $1 trillion.
To make a Solara leap, you have to shift from solving a symptom to fundamentally rewiring the economic model of the industry.
How did they do that?
Once VitalScan was embedded in thousands of hospitals, they had access to unprecedented longitudinal population health data.
Meaning they could see how millions of people were getting sick over time?
Yes. And they realized they could use that data to predict disease progression before the patient ever needed the hospital. They evolved from being an imaging tool to an AI-driven preventative infrastructure.
Wait, how does prevention make them $1 trillion company? Aren't hospitals paid to treat sick people?
Hospitals are, but insurers and self-insured employers are the ones actually paying the bills.
Ah, follow the money.
Right. An acute late-stage hospitalization can cost an insurer $1 million. If VitalScan's predictive infrastructure can flag a patient and intervene with a $500 preventive treatment a year earlier, the insurer saves $999,500.
That's a massive margin.
Insurers will pay astronomical premiums for that capability. VitalScan stopped selling a diagnostic product and started selling the future of medicine.
Okay, that is a staggering pivot. Let's look at the other legacy behemoth, education. Case study 4 is a company called EduForge.
EduForge began as an edtech startup with a great personalized learning algorithm. It adapted to the student's pace, helped them master coding or math, and it worked really well.
But again, to reach scale, they had to understand the actual market.
Right. And the author describes their marketing team acting like anthropologists.
Anthropologists studying the strange rituals of the job market. What civilizational problem did they uncover?
The radar insight was that society's primary measurement of human capability, which is the traditional 4-year university degree, is completely broken.
It's absurdly expensive.
It takes too long, the curriculum is outdated by the time you graduate, and it is largely irrelevant to the actual skills required in modern work.
I want everyone listening to think about this for a second. Think about your own resume. Think about your own credentials. How much time and money did you spend to get a piece of paper that proves, something you probably haven't thought about in 10 years?
Right.
And how little does that piece of paper actually reflect what you are capable of doing today?
The fundamental problem EduForge identified wasn't a lack of educational content. The internet is totally flooded with free, high-quality content.
You can learn anything on YouTube.
Exactly. The problem was a lack of trust in credentials. Employers trust a Harvard degree, not because the information is better, but because of the rigorous filtering process. EduForge realized they didn't need to build a better school. They needed to build the better proof layer.
So they expand adjacently into credential verification. But again, you can't just print your own certificates and expect IBM to accept them.
No, absolutely not. To get the legitimacy required, they executed reverse cell division with Atlas Learning Group.
Who are they?
Atlas was a massive legacy assessment and textbook conglomerate. They had deep institutional roots, relationships with global employers, and an army of psychometricians. But they had archaic technology.
So EduForge brings the adaptive tech, Atlas brings the institutional trust, and this fusion allows them to make their Solara leap. They build the global skills passport.
Here is how the global skills passport works. It maps the precise skills required by modern employers in real time. It provides the micro-learning modules to acquire those skills. Then it assesses the outcomes practically, not with multiple choice tests, but by having you solve real-world problems. Finally, it issues cryptographically verified credentials.
Let's explain cryptographically verified simply because it sounds like blockchain jargon.
Sure. Think of a traditional college transcript as a piece of paper that can be easily forged or altered. A cryptographically verified credential is a digital certificate that is mathematically locked.
So it's tamper-proof.
Yes. When you submit it to an employer, a quick digital check instantly proves that you are the one who earned it, it hasn't been tampered with, and it was officially issued by the passport system. It completely eliminates resume fraud.
And the trillion-dollar business model behind this is revolutionary. They turn education into a lifelong subscription economy.
Exactly. It's the end of the 4-year degree as a terminal event. You don't finish your education at age 22.
You just keep going.
Right. Instead, you subscribe to a continuous human upgrade cycle for your entire career. As your industry evolves, your passport pings you, you take a targeted module, your capabilities constantly measured, verified, and updated. It completely changes how human capital is valued in the job market.
But the author doesn't shy away from the massive implications of this. Because if EduForge controls the global skills passport, they essentially control who gets hired globally.
They become a planetary gatekeeper.
Which is an enormous concentration of power. And it perfectly transitions us to Section 5, building civilization infrastructure. Because when companies reach this scale, they stop being mere businesses. They become planetary systems.
This is what true Solara scale looks like. We have 3 case studies in this section: finance, energy, and labor. These are the pillars of human civilization. Let's start with finance and a company called Unbanked Pay.
Okay, Unbanked Pay targeted the roughly 2 billion unbanked people globally. Their radar insight was profound. They realized that unbanked populations didn't just need another shiny mobile wallet app on their phone.
There were hundreds of those, and none of them talked to each other.
Right. What these populations needed was an interoperability layer.
What does an interoperability layer mean in this context? Let's clarify that.
It means the plumbing. If you have wallet A and I have wallet B, and the local merchant uses wallet C, we can't transact unless there is a unified layer underneath that connects us all. It requires universal identity verification and instant settlement.
Right. And the text notes that Unbanked Pay was heavily inspired by systems in India, specifically Aadhaar, which is their national biometric ID system, and UPI, the Unified Payments Interface.
UPI allows instant zero-fee money transfers between any 2 bank accounts, right?
Yes, exactly. Unbanked Pay wanted to build that kind of universal plumbing for regions that lacked a central government strong enough to enforce it.
But here's the catch-22. You can build the plumbing, but how do you convince millions of skeptical, low-income people to trust a digital system with their physical cash?
And this leads to the most radical, aggressive, tactical move in the entire book. Unbanked Pay used their corporate foundation not as a PR charity, but as a direct market expansion strategy.
Explain how that worked, because on the surface, giving away money doesn't sound like a sound business strategy.
Well, Unbanked Pay's foundation funded massive, large-scale, direct cash transfer pilots. They literally pumped millions of dollars of unconditional cash directly into the digital wallets of people in the poorest communities.
So they are just giving people free money on the app. How does that force market adoption?
Think about the mechanics. If I drop $100 digital into the wallets of everyone in a village, I have instantly created liquidity. Suddenly, the local merchants realize, wait, everyone here has digital cash, but I can only accept it if I download the Unbanked Pay merchant app.
So the merchants adopt it out of necessity?
Yes. The users see the money is real, so they start trusting the system for their own savings. Unbanked Pay literally seeded the local economy to force the network effect.
They bought the network effect by solving extreme poverty in that specific area.
Brilliant, right?
And then they execute reverse cell division with the local telecom providers, the guys who control the physical cell towers. And they become the unified financial layer for entire continents. They scaled by turning morality into market adoption.
It is a breathtaking strategy. Now let's look at case study 6, Green Grid. We are moving from digital money to physical electricity.
GreenGrid starts as a software company trying to optimize microgrids. A microgrid is basically a localized energy system, like a neighborhood or a factory has its own solar panels and batteries and can operate independently from the main power grid.
Right. And initially, Green Grid was trying to sell this software to individual communities, but their radar revealed that communities don't actually want software. They want energy sovereignty.
They want reliable, cheap power that doesn't go out when a storm hits.
Exactly. But expanding microgrids puts you directly at war with regional utility operators. And utility companies are entrenched monopolies. They own the wires, they own the poles, they have armies of lobbyists. If you fight them, they will crush you.
So GreenGrid refuses to fight. They use reverse cell division. They approach the legacy utility companies and offer a fusion.
Right. GreenGrid software allows the utility company to manage decentralized power sources smoothly, preventing blackouts and reducing maintenance costs. GreenGrid fuses with the incumbents rather than fighting them.
And that fusion enables their massive Solara leap. Once they are integrated with utility companies across the world, they begin building GEOS, the Global Energy Operating System.
GEOS is an attempt to treat physical energy the way the internet treats data packets.
Okay, break that down for me.
Think about how the internet routes information. If a server goes down in New York, the internet dynamically routes the data through Chicago so the user never even notices. GEOS applies that exact same logic to electricity.
So if a massive solar farm in North Africa is overproducing energy at noon, and Europe is experiencing an energy deficit because it's cloudy, GEOS dynamically routes that power across regional grids in real time.
Exactly. And mirroring the unbanked pay strategy, GreenGrid uses its foundation to fund energy access infrastructure in the poorest, totally off-grid regions.
Building the network.
Yes. By subsidizing the initial hardware, they create massive dormant markets that are suddenly awakened and completely reliant on the Green Grid infrastructure.
It's literally planetary engineering. Okay, for the final case study, we look at RoboForge. This is the one that feels like we are living in a science fiction novel today. It's about robotics.
RoboForge initially tried to sell advanced robotic arms to manufacturing plants and warehouses. But their radar insight shifted everything. They realized that factory owners didn't actually want to buy robots.
Why not?
Because robots break, they require maintenance, they depreciate in value.
So what did the factory owners actually want?
What they were desperate for was labor sovereignty. They simply couldn't hire enough humans to run their shifts. Populations in the developed world are aging, birth rates are dropping, and honestly, nobody wants to do grueling physical labor anymore.
So RoboForge makes an incredible Solara leap. They stop selling physical machines entirely. They rebrand and launch a model based on selling physical labor units.
It's AWS for physical work.
Let's explain AWS for context. Amazon Web Services revolutionized the internet because startups no longer had to buy and maintain expensive physical servers. They just rented computing power from Amazon by the hour.
RoboForge did that for human movement.
So if I own a warehouse, I don't buy a robotic forklift, I subscribe to lifting capacity. If I own a farm, I subscribe to harvesting capacity. RoboForge owns the machines, deploys them, updates them, and I just pay for the labor output.
Exactly. And because it's an intelligent, connected network, they quickly expand adjacently from warehouses into agriculture, construction, and even elder care. They become the universal physical labor layer.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting and a little terrifying. RoboForge is literally automating the human physical workforce on a planetary scale.
Yeah.
Green Grid controls the energy, EdgeForge controls access to jobs, unbanked pay controls the money.
We have arrived at the inevitable consequence of building economic suns.
Right. Because if a handful of companies automate human labor and manage the planet's infrastructure, they're capturing almost all the economic value generated by human civilization.
Which is an insane amount of wealth.
What stops them from becoming dystopian overlords? What stops the founders of these companies from becoming trillionaires while the rest of humanity starves?
And that precise dilemma is the entire reason the author wrote the final section of the book. All the strategy we just discussed is totally useless if the system collapses under the weight of wealth inequality. This is the structural blueprint for responsible capitalism.
Let's pause for a quick reality check here. We are about to dive into the author's specific philosophical arguments and structural designs regarding wealth distribution and capitalism. As always, you and I are here to impartially unpack the source material. We are not endorsing or condemning any political viewpoints, whether they lean left or right. Our goal is just to explore the pure mechanics of what the author is proposing.
Fair enough. The author begins by identifying a core paradox in how we build massive companies. To execute a decades-long vision like building a global energy operating system or replacing the human workforce with robotics, founders fundamentally need control.
Because if a visionary founder loses control to a traditional board of directors, the board will almost always optimize the company for short-term quarterly profits.
Exactly. They will cut the R&D budget for the solar grid to artificially boost the stock price for the next earnings call.
Right, so the infrastructure of the future requires long-term, almost dictatorial focus.
But, and this is the crux of the author's argument, while the founder absolutely needs governance control, they absolutely do not need $200 billion in personal liquid wealth.
The author argues that extreme wealth accumulation isn't just morally questionable, it's a structural design flaw in capitalism. It destabilizes society, hollows out the middle class, and ultimately invites massive political backlash that will destroy the company anyway.
So the solution is an elegant structural separation.
Oh.
You must split economic ownership from voting ownership.
How does that actually work in practice?
Through the use of dual-class shares. The founder maintains supervoting shares. This means even if they only own, say, 5% of the company economically, they might hold 51% of the voting power.
Ah, so they maintain absolute strategic control.
Right. But they willingly and structurally redirect the vast majority of their economic upside away from their personal bank accounts.
Redirect it where? To taxes?
No, the author is deeply skeptical of relying purely on government bureaucracy. Instead, the author introduces the 10% foundation model.
This is the rule that every tech startup must adhere to from day one.
Yes. The rule is that at the moment of incorporation, the company must allocate 10% of its equity to a poverty-focused foundation.
A permanent one.
Yes. This cannot be a vanity project. It cannot be a tax dodge controlled by the founder's family, and it must have independent governance. Most importantly, it is a permanent, sovereign shareholder.
Let's follow the math on this, because this is where the economic sun metaphor really pays off. If you embed this 10% foundation when the company is worth $0, nobody cares.
Sure.
But let's say RoboForge reaches Solara scale. Let's say they automate half the global supply chain, and the company is valued at $3 trillion.
If the company's worth $3 trillion, that embedded foundation is sitting on $300 billion of equity. The success of the company automatically and structurally funds the foundation.
The company acts like a sun, radiating wealth outward to the most vulnerable, rather than acting like a fortress hoarding wealth inward for a single founder.
Beautifully put.
But what does the foundation actually do with the money? The text is very critical of traditional philanthropy.
Extremely critical. The author views traditional philanthropy as inefficient, patronizing, and slow. Instead, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the author argues that poverty is not a mystery, and it is certainly not a moral failing of the poor.
What is it then?
Poverty is simply a liquidity trap. It is an engineering problem.
A liquidity trap. Meaning people are poor because they just don't have cash.
Precisely. If you are extremely poor, you cannot execute long-term decisions. You can't invest in a water filter because you need to buy food today. You are trapped in short-term survival mechanics.
So the Foundation's primary weapon to fix this engineering problem is direct, scalable cash transfers.
Using the digital rails built by companies like Unbanked Pay, the author argues that tech founders are the world's best systems engineers. They know how to scale software to 3 billion people.
So they should use those skills for poverty.
Yes, they must use those exact same engineering skills to deploy capital. They must treat poverty eradication as a core product roadmap, subject to the same rigorous testing and scaling as any software launch.
It is a profound reimagining of corporate architecture. The idea that a company's very existence, its fundamental DNA, is tethered to the economic elevation of the poorest people on the planet.
It really is.
Let's summarize the immense journey we've taken through this text today. We started with the absolute necessity of hitting the baseline: product, market fit, and revenue.
Right.
We learned how to abandon the marketing megaphone and build a radar nervous system to actually listen to the market and find adjacent lanes.
We explored the radical humility required for cooperation capitalism, learning how to execute reverse cell division, building trust stacks, and accepting the junior partner principle instead of waging endless, destructive corporate war.
We saw how those exact mechanics allow companies to break through barriers and scale from unicorns into Solara-level planetary infrastructure.
We tracked this through B2B software, consumer AI calendars, healthcare risk calculus, credential verification, global energy routing, and the automation of physical labor.
And finally, we unpack the moral architecture required to sustain this scale, the separation of voting control from wealth hoarding, and the embedding of the 10% foundation model to ensure that as these platforms govern the future, they systematically engineer the end of global poverty.
But, and this is important, the author leaves us with a stark warning. The text calls it the interim problem.
The interim problem, what is that?
It addresses the dangerous gap in time we're living in right now. It is the gap between the crushing scarcity of today and the promised AI-driven abundance of tomorrow. The author warns that we absolutely cannot sit back and wait for technology to magically fix poverty decades from now.
Because the suffering happening in the interim is real, and it is deeply destabilizing to society. If people feel the future has no place for them, they will burn the system down before the abundance ever arrives.
Exactly. The poverty eradication systems, the massive cash transfers, the foundations, must be engineered and deployed now in parallel with the technological infrastructure. We have to build the bridge while we're crossing it.
It is an incredible challenge for the next generation of founders. And it leaves me with a final provocative thought. Something for you to mull over that builds on the blueprint of this text, but steps just beyond it into the philosophical realm. Let's fast forward. Let's assume the author's vision comes to pass. Let's say these Solara-scale companies succeed.
Okay, let's say they do. They eradicate extreme poverty through massive automated cash transfers. And companies like RoboForge fully automate global physical labor.
Right. When basic survival is guaranteed and the endless pursuit of financial accumulation is no longer the primary driver of human existence, what happens to human ambition?
It's the ultimate existential question. If the struggle to survive is removed, what do we replace it with? If we don't have to toil in the fields or sit in cubicles to earn our existence, who do we actually become?
What will you, the listeners, the learners of the world, strive for next when the economic sun is doing all the heavy lifting? When poverty is a historical footnote and labor is optional, will we find new, higher mountains to climb? Will we explore the stars or dive deeper into art and philosophy? Or will we just bask in the light, content to be governed by the systems we built? It's something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.